Oh, hi there! Welcome to an episode of the Okanagan Gardener and Forager channel. Today I'm going to talk to you about a group of trees, mountain ashes. There's several varieties. Around here there's Western mountain ash and Sitka mountain ash. And they are edible, but they don't taste great. So, I don't know, maybe this is kind of, should be in the nice to know category or interesting to know category. They're high in vitamin C, and I'm not going to make any claims, but my understanding is vitamin C can be very helpful for fighting off various colds and sicknesses. And, yeah, they don't taste great, but after they freeze a bunch of times, they get better, apparently. But I will say, as a word of warning, they're considered somewhat toxic, but cooking them should take care of that. Mountain ashes. There are several varieties in North America. European mountain ash, found all across Canada. And it was introduced from Europe, but it's escaped in a lot of places. Often as an ornamental in people's yards. And then there's American mountain ash, which is also can be found in Canada, but more in the east, like Ontario and east to Newfoundland and some of the northeastern states. And then what this one here, I'm quite confident is Western mountain ash, Sorbus scopulina, found in BC, the Yukon, Northwest Territories, and from BC east to Saskatchewan. And then also likely south into the other places in the Pacific Northwest. There's another variety in BC called Sitka mountain ash, which the scientific name is Sorbus sitchensis, found in Yukon, the Yukon Territory, BC, and Western Alberta. There are two varieties of mountain ash that are found native to the area in the Okanagan. There's Sitka mountain ash and Western mountain ash, and I'm fairly confident that this is an example of the Western mountain ash because it's falling apart, but it would come with 9 to 13 leaflets, and they're long and narrow and fairly pointed. And also the toothed edges are fairly sharp along them, whereas the Sitka is more rounded, and the teeth edges are finer. And the toothed edges go almost all the way to the bottom, whereas on the Sitka they would go maybe only halfway. It's a little hard to tell because it's late in the season, but that's basically how it is. That's what I'm fairly confident. This is Western mountain ash. And the berries are orange to crimson, and yes, they are edible. They don't taste that good, but I'll tell you more about that later. They're not so good, but they're edible. I said the berries were orange to crimson. I meant orange to scarlet in color. And yes, they are all edible. And they can be eaten raw, cooked, or dried. And they can be, well, even though they are edible, many indigenous groups considered them inedible. Probably because they're quite bitter or tart. But they were used, sometimes added to other berries, or used to make a marinade. For meat like marmot. So the berries are very tart and bitter, but they get more palatable and more mild tasting into the winter after successive freezings. And what happens actually as well is the berries kind of ferment, so birds will often eat them after they've fermented for a while. We had a tree in my yard growing up, and just at some point in the winter, all of a sudden the birds, I guess the berries were good enough, and they would swarm the berries, and I think they got drunk and sometimes crashed into windows. Anyways, when eating the berries, they would usually be cooked and sweetened to make things like jams, jellies, pies, an ale, or a bittersweet wine, so people can use them for alcohol too, just like the birds. As far as medicine goes, some indigenous people in the area boiled the peeled branches or the inner bark to make teas for treating things like back pain, colds, headaches, rheumatism, sore chests, and internal bleeding. And the berries can be used to make a juice, which is rich in vitamin C. And a berry tea could also be made, which would be used to gargle, relieving sore throats and tonsillitis. Western mountain ash is widespread and common at low to subalpine elevations, in moist forests, openings, and clearings, and they grow from 1 to 5 meters tall. So there's a description of western mountain ash, and this time of year I ran out of daylight, and the foraging opportunities are fairly limited. So yeah, are you gonna really be foraging for western mountain ash? Well, maybe. You could use it and, like people do, cook it and make, you know, alcohol and jellies and jams and pies and stuff with it. And I'll put a link in the description to some of the books that I used, and there's some recipes in them. But you know, it is rich in vitamin C. You could use it maybe in a pinch, and maybe it's in different types of medicine that you'd like to try, or maybe if you couldn't get something else, you could. It's not going to be my first choice, but here where I am in the Okanagan in November, you're not going to find much else, and maybe that makes it worthwhile. Anyways, if you got something out of the video, then please give it a thumbs up, and thanks for watching.